Broadwater Reporter. We would like to say thank you for taking time out to come and learn a little bit more about some candidates that's going to be running for county attorney for Broadwater County. My name is Trudy Sapwick. I'm with the Broadwater Reporter, and we have a moderator, Gayanne Mazzola, and then our timekeeper, Liz Wood from Wood Family Grill. And Gayanne's going to give you the rules and give these guys the rules. And with a coin toss just a few minutes ago, Mr. Morris won the start but deferred it to Mr. Swanson. So we have.
I want to receive on the second half.
So we have Corey Swanson and we have Jack Morris. Before she gives us the rules, if everyone would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. And we all. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First of all, we want to thank Trudy and the Broadwater Reporter and the Rod and Gun Club for doing this. It's really a great time for us to find out who the candidates are. And we also really want to thank the candidates for running because I think it's a great job and we appreciate you doing it. It's not easy to run for public office. You're criticized and you're praised. We'll respect the candidates and we will allow questions from the audience later. We do have a list of questions that we'll ask here. And if anyone becomes belligerent or extremely angry or causing problems, I'll throw you out. You're all safe, you know that. And I always think about when I was in legislature, the first thing they always told us in the Business and Labor Committee was, your job's to talk, our job's to listen, make sure we don't quit before you. I always think about that. We're going to give each candidate the opportunity for a 5-minute introductory speech, and then I will ask you the questions, the same question, and you'll each have 3 minutes to answer. And then you'll be allowed to ask their opponents, if you want to, each other a question. And then you'll be given 3 minutes to answer that, and Liz is in charge of all the timing. And are you ready to start? Any questions? Okay. The first question we have.
You want to do the opening
Introduction.
first?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, we have that off. Okay, Corey, I guess you got it.
Sorry to pick up. But thank you for hosting and for moderating this. Thank you to Trudy and the Gun Club for hosting this. And thank you all for coming. And feel free to ask us hard questions. Ask the harder ones to Jack. I do want to, before we begin, introduce my wife, Julie Swanson, is here in the front row. And my father, John Swanson's here, and my mother and one of my sisters will be here in a while. They're coming in. So I guess just to begin, everyone's wondering who is this Corey Swanson guy? And we placed some literature there on the chair for you to look at. We've had some things in the newspaper, and that's just kind of a bio. And you can look at our bio, and that's great. That tells you a little bit about who we are. But really, what you want to know is, what am I going to do, and how am I going to do it? And so to tell you that, I will tell you the reason that I decided to run for this office. I have been a lawyer. I graduated from law school 10 years ago. I'm in the National Guard, so in that time, right after I graduated, in fact, I immediately got deployed to Iraq. I've gone twice, and that's been a bit of a disruption in my legal career, but you learn things about life and leadership and working with people through that you can't find in the law office. Then I was working in a civil law firm and became a partner in a firm and worked there for 5 years. And right now I work for the Montana Attorney General, and I do a lot of civil law, I do a little bit of criminal law, and I've taken on some very big cases, and I've taken on some really small cases, and I've taken on just some tough policy issues. And so along that way, I've always wanted to be a prosecutor and be somebody who is focused on the law enforcement part of the law. And the reason for that is because as a civil lawyer, a lot of times you deal with things that are the kind of the cleanest part of the law. Not always. You get into family issues and they can be really messy. But a lot of times you're dealing with, you know, a particular lawsuit where you're dealing with the clean part of the law. But you get into criminal law and you're dealing with people that really, really need help. You're dealing with crime victims who really need to be taken care of, who really need to know that someone there who's in a position of authority cares about how they were hurt. And you need to deal with defendants who are scared to death. They did something really stupid, and they need to know that even if they're ultimately found guilty, that the system's fair. And you're dealing with judges who are looking to you to give you the best answer. And you're looking to law enforcement that's going to care about the fact, or that you're going to care about the fact that they worked really hard to put a case together, and you're not just going to throw it in the garbage. And you get into situations where you meet people where they're really vulnerable and they really need someone that cares about justice. And I want to be able to come into that situation and tell the people, look, you're not going to always like what I do. You're not always going to like the decisions I make, and sometimes I'm going to screw up in a trial. But I come to the table caring about justice, caring about you if you were hurt, caring about giving you a fair trial, caring about the cops who are out there risking their life on a daily or weekly basis. And that's what I want to bring to this position. I also want to bring some leadership and some opportunities to heal some of the divisions in the community and among the county government. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we have some people problems. We don't necessarily have insurmountable constitutional problems. We have relationship problems, and they can be fixed and they can be healed. And I've talked a lot in the newspaper, and I've put things in there about being positive and about teamwork and about looking for a future, a community where we get along with each other. And that's because I've been through some horrendously difficult situations where people were nearly hating each other, and we had to learn to bring those relationships back together. And that's what I want to do on a daily, weekly basis in this position of county attorney. Now, I'm not the lawyer who's got the most trials. Yeah, I've done some real big trials, and I've done some real big cases, and there's a lot of stuff I still have to learn. But the one thing I can tell you is I can come to the office every day, caring about people, treating them with civility and respect, and working with people, admitting my own mistakes, and working with people to make our processes get better, and try to get over this, what's been now a couple years of division and fighting that everybody I've talked to is tired of it. Everybody's tired of it, and they say, let's just get the right answers, and let's try to do better, week by week and month by month. So that'd be my commitment of what you can expect from me. You can't expect perfection, but you can expect me to give you my very best.
Thank you. Before I get started, I just want to thank Corey for the way he's been running the campaign. When I decided to run, I looked Corey up, and we shook hands and we talked and we said, good on you, and let's have a nice clean race, and I appreciate that. Anyway, my name is Jack Morris, and I grew up in Madison County, Montana. I went to school at Butte Central Catholic High School. My mother thought we needed religion, so she sent us all to Butte for school. But I know I grew up on my grandpa's ranch, and I've done all kinds of different jobs. On my handout, I got kind of my resume for the Broadwater County Attorney. After law school, I had the opportunity to clerk for a judge named Frank Davis. This was during one of my summer, and Frank was down in Dillon, Montana, and he was the judge on the, if you remember, the Mountain Man case from Big Sky, where Kerry Swanson, the biathlete, was kidnapped by Dan and Don Nichols. Frank was the judge on that, and he was a real character, and I really enjoyed my time, and I learned a lot from him. But my first job out of law school, I clerked for Jeff Sherlock, who used to be your judge down here in Broadwater County, and that's when I first met John Flynn back in about 1991. And my first job after clerking for Jeff Sherlock was I went back to Whitehall, where I grew up. A man named John Jardine had been the lawyer in Whitehall since 1951, and he took the practice over from a guy named Philip Duncan, who became the district court judge. The dean from the law school brought John down to Whitehall and introduced him, and that's how John I got to Whitehall, well, same thing. John called me up and said, I'm getting ready to retire, Jack. Well, here's the keys. And so that's how I started my career in the law. And boy, I'll tell you what, I learned fast and I learned on the go. I graduated from Gonzaga over in Spokane, Washington, and a lot of my friends went to some of these bigger law firms, and I'd talk to them periodically, and I would say, God, I got a case or a trial, I'm going to court, and so they were shocked. They couldn't go to court for 5 years until they made the partners didn't trust them. But in a small rural community like Whitehall, I started from day one. I go to court, and I still go to court a couple of times a week. Being a small town attorney, you don't get to pick who your clients are. My office John's office was right across the street from the post office in Whitehall. So I knew when the mail got delivered, we had an open door policy. People would come in with letters or whatnot, and they'd want to talk to you without appointments, and that's just the way it was done. I practiced law in Whitehall for close to 18 years. I represented small business people. I represented the Golden Sunlight Mine, which was one of the bigger employers in the whole Jefferson Valley. I did a lot of their real estate transactional work. I represented Smith Contracting. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Yellowstone Club or a guy named Tim Blixus. Well, back in the 90s, I got a call from my client who had been building the roads for this place, and Mr. Blixus owed my client something to the tune of $800,000. And he said, what do I do? So this is in the early 90s, I look at the construction lien law, and that's one of the things about being a small town lawyer. We don't specialize. We have to learn, and we jump around from subject to subject. Well, I slapped the construction lien on the entire 23,000 acres of what became the Yellowstone Club. And about a week later, I get a call from a law firm in Portland with about 10 names attached to it, and they told me they were going to chainsaw me if I didn't remove the lien. And I said, well, you're going to have to come to Montana and deal with it. Well, bottom line is my client got paid, and we all know what happened to the Yellowstone Club. But I have a very varied background in law. Judge Davis, when a new lawyer came to his district, and the district was Beaverhead, Madison, and Jefferson counties, we didn't have a public defender's office. So he thought that the best way to go was to give the new lawyers the public defender cases. So I got a lot of public defender cases, and there's one in particular that I'm real proud of. It's called State versus McLeese. And what that case went to the Montana Supreme Court, and what it stands for is there's something called the apparent authority doctrine. We used to have that, that's what the federal standard is, but my case, and I was only out of law school 6 or 7 years when this happened. Now in Montana, the law is that for the police to search someone's residence, they have to have actual authority from an owner, not from a neighbor, not from a babysitter, not from a landlord. But that's a case that I did back in the 90s, and that's great experience that I got. The reason I'm running for county attorney in this job, I've tried over 100 cases in my career, and what I've seen lately is a lot of lack of discretion. Either prosecutors aren't prosecuting people that need to be prosecuted, or they're overcharging people. And I've got a lot of clients who aren't your average, what you call criminal, that I've represented. So, thank you.
Okay, Corey, you take a question first, or do we switch now?
You're moderator.
Okay, well, we'll trade off on, okay. At 3 minutes. Do you anticipate a need to expand the office with a potential need to hire a deputy attorney and/or a criminal investigator position?
No, I don't. If there's an expansion, I think it needs to be a paralegal or a secretary. Here's how I understand the current situation. First of all, we've only had a full-time county attorney with a high salary for a short while. John Flynn for years did this as a part-time practice while he also had his own practice and didn't have to. And so right now, the work habits and the hours of the incumbent, I don't believe that there's any real justification for a deputy county attorney. I expect to go in, put in long hours. I put in long hours in my job now. I expect to put in long hours and be the only county attorney. I will rely on Mako and some other expertise for civil stuff when I need it. I'll certainly rely on the state prosecutors for criminal expertise when I need it, but I don't think that there's a need to hire anybody. I mean, I would say to give at least 2 years and assess it and come back, but I think it's highly unlikely that a deputy is needed. There may be a need in the staff, though, because of the way I understand it right now, there's a victims advocate who's half-time and then half-time with the court, and there's one secretary. And I think one of the ways that a lawyer works really effectively to get more done is to have an effective paralegal where you can do a lot of the prep work for a civil or criminal case. The lawyer can check on it and then come back and get end products. Now, a lady named Sherry Little used to be in the office. She was outstanding. She was chased away by the incumbent county attorney. I talked to Sherry Little and I said, hey, if I get elected, I would love to hire you. And she said, well, let me get to know you. I don't want to work for a crazy person. But I can tell you that where I see that there may be a need is for a secretary or paralegal. I do not believe, I mean, it's really beyond what I think is foreseeable that there will be a deputy county attorney. As far as a criminal investigator goes, I think we need a better working relationship with the sheriff's office and their detectives so that we can work together on cases and we can sit down and go, we need to probably talk to this person, get this subpoena, and let's check back in a week and work on cases together cooperatively like that. And then the state criminal investigators are always a resource that we can use. So I'm not going to be going in asking for an increase in budget. The only thing I would look at is whether a paralegal, somebody of a Sherry Little type person would make sense. But I really think we need to try and keep our budget low because the costs in the county government have been going up. And I want to be part of the solution there, not part of the problem.
I would tend to concur. I knew John since 1991, and it was always a part-time county attorney position. And I was surprised when I did learn that it became full-time after John passed away. And John did it for so long, part-time. So I don't anticipate the need for a deputy myself. And Sherry Little was a huge asset to that office, and it's too bad that she left. And I would do my best to try to get her to come back because I worked with her over the years, and I know how valuable she was to John. So I don't think I'm going to need a deputy. I think one of the things that I would like to do, though, is hire a summer intern from the law school just to give some law students some experience. And there's a lot of kids who will do internships without pay just so they can put it on their resume and get a taste of it. As for working with law enforcement, I mean, law enforcement investigates. They're the ones who are out in the field. They're the ones who are determining probable cause determinations, and they're the ones who bring a request for a prosecution to the county attorney's office. And if there's some dysfunction or the people aren't getting along, the system's broke. Okay, and we got to put personalities aside, and we have to work together. Okay, I wrote an article in the Broadwater Reporter, I think when I made my announcement, and the case law, we call it. That's what the Montana Supreme Court, every week we get a new decision. And every year there's a wrinkle or a change in the criminal case law. And then we've got the legislature who changes the law. And we as attorneys have to keep on top of that. And I think it's our duty also to meet with the deputies and the sheriff as often as we can to discuss changes in search and seizure, changes in probable cause, changes in reasonable suspicion on stops. So without that relationship, the system is broken and it needs to be fixed. And I've been an attorney for 23 years. I've run my own practice. I've gone all over the state, and I've met attorneys all over the state, and I believe that I can work with whoever. And I can work with our sheriff now, who I know pretty well, and a lot of the deputies. So, but I think that is paramount. Is we got to get that fixed. So, thank you.
Okay, Jack, what do you consider your strongest asset and or experience, civil or criminal law?
I would say, I'm a litigator, okay? So I would say most of my practice in the last 10 years has been criminal litigation. I was the Whitehall City Attorney for 8 years. It was a part-time position. I prosecuted all of the crimes that occurred within the Whitehall town limits. And the most challenging part of that job was going to the monthly town council meetings. And it got pretty contentious. We had a fist fight break out in one of our town council meetings, if you can believe that. But my biggest strength, I think, as an attorney is my litigation skills, and you get that by doing it. You know, from day one, I've been trying cases. I've tried over 100 cases. I tried in 2011, I think I tried 10 cases. I won 8 of them. The 2 that I lost are on appeal to the Supreme Court, and the other one is on appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I'm going out to Seattle on May the 13th. Now, this is a federal case, and I'm arguing before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a pretty big deal for a small town lawyer in Montana to have that opportunity. But my biggest strength, I think, is litigation, but I've also advised the town council in Whitehall, and there's a case called Town of Whitehall versus Priest, and it had to do with water meters in Whitehall, and we had kind of an uprising against that. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. I was a young attorney at the time, and I think Justice Turnage realized maybe I didn't have quite the expertise, so he asked the Attorney General's office, he asked MACO, and he asked bond counsel to file amicus briefs, but I argued that case before the Supreme Court, and the town prevailed. And but my biggest strength is litigation, and that's what probably 80% of a county attorney is prosecuting the crimes that occur within Broadwater County.
Okay, so my greatest strength at this point is civil law. I've done primarily civil law. I've done some pretty big cases. Represent the state of Montana right now in a case, Montana against Wyoming, fighting over the Tongue River. We tried a case, trial last fall. It was 25 days. We've spent, I think our budget is $2.5 million over the last 2 years, and it's just a massive case. Hundreds of documents, bunches of witnesses. I was in California last Thursday arguing our closing argument on it, and this is a case it's in the Supreme Court under a trial judge, and we're going to the Supreme Court next fall, so the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's a big case. I've done a fair amount of civil litigation. I'm new to criminal law. When I recognized that I wanted to take this, apply for this job and run for this position, in the job that I'm in now, I can do either criminal or civil law. I began asking for criminal prosecution opportunities. So I'm on 5 different criminal cases now. I'll probably have another 5 to 10 more by the end of the year. So I'll have done a few criminal cases, a few to jury trial. I don't have the years of criminal experience that Jack does. The difference is I haven't done any criminal defense. Most of Jack, well, at least lately, has been criminal defense, but he's done a lot of civil and city stuff as well. I think there's one other thing to think about, and that is not just the litigation and the criminal work, but it's the role of the attorney as an advisor. And I've had multiple clients that were an organization where you've got maybe 5 people on a board that don't disagree or that don't agree, and you're not the client for just 1 or 2 of those people. You're the attorney. You're the attorney for the organization, the entity. And so if they don't agree, you've got to work with that organization. In this case, it'd be the county commission with 3 people. You've got to work with them to come to decisions, resolutions, and moving things forward. And that's a whole different animal in itself. You have to work with the entity, the Broadwater County Commission, not just 1 or 2 of them. You have to work with all 3 of them. And so there's a people relationship skill there that I've learned over the years from having to work with the clients that are an organization where the board of directors is split, and I've said, hey, we have got to come to a decision here. If we have to lock ourselves in a room, work through our bad feelings, and ultimately come out with a decision that we can all live with, that's what we need to do. And that's a skill that I've learned the hard way with some knothead clients. And that's a skill that I think is going to be a big part of this county attorney job in the next few years.
I'm glad that you understand you're also on the town advisor.
Yes.
Okay, Corey, it's your turn first this time. As prosecuting attorney for Broadwater County, what do you consider the highest priority case that will come before you? DUIs, drugs, domestic, or other?
Well, I think the highest priority cases in terms of not only visibility, but in terms of understanding the sensitivities are going to be violent crimes, where someone is killed, or someone is severely injured, or there's some kind of a severe sexual abuse or something like that, because then you are dealing with not only just the severely hurt feelings of the victim, but you're also oftentimes dealing with a defendant that has some serious problems. You're not just somebody that made a mistake and got drunk and was driving home on a Saturday night. You're dealing with something that has the potential to impact many people for the rest of their lives. So when you get a case like that, and this is the way it works in our state, whenever you get a homicide or a serious aggravated assault or say a rape or a sexual abuse case, you automatically get your investigators and you say, let's call the best investigators in the state at the Department of Criminal Investigation, and let's ask them to help. And we call the prosecutors at the Attorney General's office who've done this, and this is specifically what they specialize in, is the homicides, the rape cases, the severe assault cases with serious bodily injury. And what you do is you don't bring them in, you don't dump the case onto them, you bring it in and you say, this is a high profile case, this is a high sensitivity case. Let's sit down and really walk through all these issues so we know exactly how to charge it and exactly how to take care of the victim to not cause further harm. So that's probably your highest individual case priority. But what I've seen lately, and I've been going to a lot of the law and justice motion, law and motion days at the county here, what I've seen is in general what I would call my highest priority is actually going back and looking at all the cases that aren't being charged. There are a lot of cases right now in this county that are not being charged. And there are a lot of cases in this county that are being pled out at very, very low sentences. I was in a hearing where Judge Reynolds rejected 3 different plea agreements that the county attorney had reached with public defenders because he said they were too low. That is very unusual for a district court judge to do that. And for 3 in 1 day is nearly unheard of. Not only that, but the prosecutor was standing there talking like the defense attorney, saying, this person's got a job, they've taken responsibility. So the first thing I would do is go back and just say, do we have a mindset problem here that needs to be fixed, where we really need to go back and look at cases that aren't being charged? And do we really need to go back and look at some of the deals that are being offered and say, I don't think that's fair to the victims. And I don't think that's fair to the police work that's being done, and I don't think that's fair to preventing future crimes being recommitted by these people. So that would be my first priority as a general sense. But in terms of highest priority crimes, it's clearly going to be those violent crimes.
Can you try and do something with that window? He's black.
The Lewis case comes to mind. John Jardine, my
maybe
mentor,
hook something over
it
the
was
top.
his sister-in-law who was
Do we have
murdered,
another one of these sheets?
back in that case, and I've been involved in that, know about it since it had happened, and I understand what happened recently with Judge Reynolds' decision. But my priority would be sexual assault, sexual offense cases, because the damage they do to the fabric of our society and the cycle of dysfunction that permeates from that, but also violent crimes. Obviously, keeping our county safe is a #1 priority. DUIs are another priority. I mean, it's rampant in our society, and it needs to be dealt with. And I agree. I've seen, one of the reasons I'm running for this job is because I've seen prosecutors who don't prosecute because of a personal relationship or something, and then people being overcharged. And I've represented, I think, a lot of clients, regular, good, upstanding people who somebody got a personal vendetta going against them. And some of my handouts, I talk about the John Luton case. John Luton was a businessman from Whitehall who became the target of a sting operation that lasted for 2.5 years. And we went through 2 different trials with the Attorney General's Office. Prosecutorial Services prosecuted that case relentlessly. We won at every turn. And then I was trying a case. I was defending a rancher down in Missoula County who was the victim of another sting operation by FWP, and I get a call from Nick Gibach. He was a reporter at the Montana Standard, and he said to me, well, what do you think about your client Luton getting federally indicted? And I said, well, that's the first I heard. He said, yeah, they charged him for filming a bighorn sheep hunt without a commercial film permit. And I said, well, I had to go to the Code of Federal Regulations, and sure enough, that is a crime. And that's the case I'm going out to the 9th Circuit. It was a Class B misdemeanor. Okay, and that's the lowest of federal crimes. Before the trial, he was charged with a Class A misdemeanor. At the pretrial conference, the AUSA, the U.S. Attorney, threw out the Class A misdemeanor. I thought, oh, we're halfway done. And Judge Strong turns to me and says, well, you know what that means, Mr. Morris? I said, no. It means your client's not entitled to a jury trial because it's only a Class B misdemeanor. Well, my client was convicted of that charge, and I'm going out, a month ago, the Ninth Circuit notified me that they're going to hear that case, a Class B misdemeanor from little old Montana, and I think we have a very good chance of prevailing. So, you know, I've seen it too often. This job takes discretion, it takes humility, it takes compassion, and it takes judgment. And that comes with time in the saddle. That comes with being in the courtroom. You got to think on your feet, and I'm pretty good at doing that.
Thank you. Question first is that
Okay.
Broadwater County did not have proper representation at the Department of Revenue case where taxable assessments were improperly made, resulting in budgetary shortfalls for the county. How would you ensure that the citizens of Broadwater County are properly represented in the future?
Well, this brings me back to when I was the White House City Attorney, and we got coal tax trust fund money and Treasure State endowment money from the legislature to put in a new municipal water system. And for 2.5 years, we put public notices in the newspaper and posted them all over town, and no one would come. Finally, it's ready to go. We're ready to start construction, and they come out of the woodwork. Oh, you know, we didn't know about this. You can't be doing this. It takes citizen involvement. It takes involvement of all of the county government. It takes involvement of our citizens. And I think that some people have been asleep at the wheel. That's just, again, I'm new to the county, but there's some issues that I think could have been prevented if they're brought to the attention of the right people. But we as citizens, we all have to be looking over and making sure our government is doing what it should be. I believe that government works best when it's closest to the people. And so all of us have a duty and I think an obligation to make sure that something like that doesn't happen again. And again, it takes everyone, not just the county attorney or the heads of the departments or the county commissioners. My job, if I were to be lucky enough to be elected county attorney, would be to advise the various department heads and also the commission on what the law is, not what my politics are, what theirs, but what the law is and what is in the best interest of this county. And I would do my best.
I'm moving over here at the request of the cameraman. I've watched a little bit about that case, and I know everyone was completely caught off guard by the assessment that came down. And you need to know, it's not like no one's ever been surprised by a tax ruling before. So I mean, there's some amount of that you've got to work very hard and you've got to do the right analysis. And sometimes Department of Revenue just does weird things. I don't think that's the case in this particular instance, though. There are a few different areas of law that you have to do what Jack suggested, which is proactive education and then proactive going in and screening your actions and your records rather than waiting for a problem to come. One of them is the taxation and all the property assessments. Another one is the human resources management, the area of how you manage your employees. Anybody who's ever run a business with more than 2 employees has taken the time to go in and look at the laws and look at the rules and set up. A lot of it's determined by your own employee handbook. You've got to set that up and make sure that it follows the law. That's complicated stuff. And that's stuff that I'm not an expert on. You're going to run into stuff that the lawyer's not an expert on. So you go get the experts. You go to MACO and you say, your human resources person needs to come down and not spend 1 hour, needs to spend 2 or 3 days with us and working through all this, and then come back in a month and spend 2 or 3 more days. That kind of hard work on the front end is going to prevent some of the fights and the clashes that we've had on the back end. And I think the same thing goes with property assessments. We actually have to go in and analyze what the county is doing and analyze the mills and analyze it by even different districts. We have a weak district or a fire district or a road district or sewer district. The other area that's a problem are dealing with roads and easements. And I can tell you right now, Broadwater County has a lurking problem. Every county in the state is supposed to be working through DNRC right now to analyze their roads and apply for historic easements and rights of way. And they go to the DNRC, it's a simple process, they go to the land board approves them, and they're done. Well, there are some counties in this state who have already done 40 of these historic easements and rights of way. And I was really curious about this the other day because I work for the Attorney General and I advise him on the land board. And so we looked at this one from Prairie County. So I called up the DNRC staffer and I said, hey, how many of these from Broadwater County have you got? 0. And the deadline is 2017 to have these complete. So in the next 3 years, Broadwater County is supposed to go through and analyze all of its roads and find out where it doesn't have an exact easement or right-of-way on state lands, and then it needs to go apply for an easement. It's not a hard process, but if you don't do it, it's pretty hard. And so that's another example where we have to go through and just analyze all these different areas of county government and county operations, and then do proactive work on the front end, rather than afterwards going, oh, we didn't know about this. Nice.
What does the supremacy clause mean to you? We're all interested in that.
So the supremacy clause is a clause in the United States Constitution that says that this Constitution is the supreme law of the land. But it doesn't mean what everybody thinks it means. It doesn't mean that every federal law is the supreme law over all of us. It is a supreme law within the area and powers of the federal government that the Constitution gives it the powers to operate. There are many areas in the law that the federal government has nothing to say about. It is the state law that decides. And in those areas where the federal government, by the United States Constitution, has no authority, the state law is the supreme law of that land. And that is something that's continually confused, and that's why we have a United States Congress that just keeps giving itself more and more powers and keeps passing more and more laws that are well beyond the authority that the United States Constitution gave the federal government. And they're now messing with the states. And so in my job as a Deputy Attorney General, I spend a lot of time litigating against the federal government. And one area that's very common is regulations by the Environmental Protection Agency. And we deal with fighting against federal EPA efforts to come and regulate the states where they don't have the authority to do that. It's the state's authority, and the state's authority should be supreme. Now, there's also some federal laws, like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, where they have what's called a cooperative federalism. And it says the state's authority is supreme in these areas so long as they don't do these pollutions that go across state lines into another state. And the EPA is continually trying to ignore that and tell the states individually what to do. So that's an area where I become familiar with the supremacy clause, because I recognize that in areas, now let's say you're talking about federal taxation, or you're talking about armed forces, or you're talking about some of those specific things, the federal law and the federal constitution are the supreme law of the land. But there are some areas, local government, police power, schools. The federal government is supposed to leave those authorities to the state. And in that area, the state actually has a supreme law of the land.
My understanding of the supremacy clause is it comes from Supreme Court decisions over the years where the federal government has supreme authority and there's federal preemption on different things. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's where it is. I understand the Bundy case down in Nevada. You know, you hear about that, but then when you put it into perspective, why in the heck does the federal government control 89% of the land mass of the state of Nevada? You know, rationally that, but it does, and there's court orders that have been in place down there. But the supremacy clause, I don't think it's going to affect my job as the county attorney here in Broadwater County. I've had my run-ins with the federal government. I don't know if you know this, but if you overpay your quarterly payroll taxes to the federal government, you get penalized. I did that. That happened to me. I thought I was going to get a refund, and I got a couple $1,000 fine because of a arithmetic error that my secretary made, and we overpaid our quarterly taxes, if you can believe that. So the supremacy clause, it is the law of the land. The way I think the original founding fathers looked at the way the Bill of Rights and the Constitution were written, anything that wasn't specifically specified as a power to the federal government was left to the states. Well, over the last 220-some years, that's been eroded away by court decisions by the United States Supreme Court, and we're stuck with that. But it's slow, it's glacial. The law changes slowly, and that's one of the geniuses of our country, is due process and constitutional rights are inconvenient, and they're supposed to. And that's why things change slowly, but when they do change, they usually change for the better. And I think the pendulum is starting to swing back to letting the states regulate what goes on within the states. So I'm not a big fan of the Supremacy Clause, but it is the law of the land. I had the opportunity to get sworn into the Supreme Court when I was a young lawyer, and I had tea with Chief Justice Rehnquist before I got sworn in because of a connection I had, and there was an en masse swearing in, and I had a seat at the front row, and I was the only guy out of 300 people who were getting sworn in who got to stand up and raise his hand, and the Chief Justice Rehnquist swore me into the Supreme Court, and he loved the fact that I was a small town lawyer from a small state in the West, because he started in Arizona, and he moved eastward to rise to Chief Justice. But the Supremacy Clause is the law of the land, and again, it changes, and I think it's swinging back, where it's out of balance, and it's starting to swing back.
Okay, I think this could probably be a yes or no question. We'll see. Do you see any potential problems representing both the city and the county?
No, I don't. I mean, prosecution of the crimes that happen, the city only has misdemeanor jurisdiction, the city court judge and the city, and the county obviously has felony jurisdiction. So I don't believe that there's going to be any problem. A lot of small towns and small counties have interagency agreements where the county attorney does represent certain municipalities within a county. So and it's based upon economics. You know, not every town can afford a full-time county or city attorney. Dillon comes to mind. They have a full-time city. They have two. And I couldn't believe what they were getting paid. I got paid $500 a month when I was the city attorney in Whitehall when I first started out, and that was for everything. I got a raise after 6 years to $750 a month. But after 8 years, I was making enough money where I didn't need the help to pay my overhead. But no, I don't see any problem whatsoever.
I think there's potential for problems, but I think you can avoid them or you can deal with them. And I know there was a problem this year where the county attorney, who's also the city attorney, in terms of advising the town council, had reached a point where there was a city policy and there was a county policy, and I won't go into all the details because I don't know all of them. And she said, well, my first loyalty is to the county, so I can't advise you on this. And I think that's the wrong answer. The city is paying part of the salary of the county attorney, and they need to expect that if they pay for that work, they're going to get that work done. So I think that the county attorney, if he or she can't work through that potential conflict, then the city should be justified in asking for a refund of the salary and hire somebody. But I think that is something that doesn't need to happen. I think it's avoidable because a lot of these issues come down to, again, personal relationships and a matter of analyzing a problem. And specifically when you deal with city, county planning jurisdiction, that's likely where you're going to see that happen. Then what the attorney has to do is clearly lay out to both clients what point A and point B are and where there may be a conflict. And you can represent clients that have conflicts so long as you inform them. You have to talk to both entities, not just one over the other. To both entities, you say, here's the potential conflict in the advice you're asking me to give each of you as clients and as entities. Here's plan A, here's plan B. I can continue to represent both of you and give you advice so long as I have your informed consent. And they actually say, yes, we understand there may be a conflict. You've advised us of the potential conflict. You've advised us of the two different points of view and the course of action we can take. And they sign it and say, we approve. Keep representing both of us. and then you work through it with a whole lot of finesse and humility and patience, and you continue to represent both of them with everyone's eyes wide open. You don't say, sorry, I represent the county, so city, you're on your own, and you don't say, oh, no, there's no conflict here, everything's fine. You be very clear and upfront to everybody, and that way everyone understands that you're being honest, you're being direct, you actually know what you're talking about, and this is not the end, and we're not burning bridges. We can continue to work together year after year.
Okay, it's time to ask each other one question, and it's 3 minutes. So, I'd say, well, Jack can ask first, since Corey started first.
I guess, Corey, just the question I'd ask you is, how much experience do you have actually prosecuting crime? Because that is about 80% of the job here is knowing, this is my Bible here, this is Title 45 and 46. This is the criminal code of the state of Montana, and I use it every day. So I guess the question is, how much experience do you have prosecuting cases so far in your career?
So yesterday, I was all scheduled to do a jury trial prosecuting a DUI. The defendant, 15 minutes before we started bringing the jury in, the defendant said, I'm really hurt, I've got this problem in my back, I can't stay, and the judge said, okay, we're going to continue for another time. Now, had things worked out differently, I would have said, hey, I prosecuted a criminal case all the way to a jury. So today what I can tell you is I came really close. Now Jack raises a fair point. I have not done a lot of prosecution. I'm currently counsel on 5 different criminal cases, and I have 3 more that are in the wings that I'm about to do. That's what I mentioned at the beginning. I think by the end of the year I'll have 10 to 12 criminal cases, many of which will settle, a couple of which will go to jury trial. And so I don't have years and years of criminal law experience. I recognize that as a weakness, and so what I've begun doing is I've begun working with deputy county attorneys, working with prosecutors in the AG's office, working with investigators, and saying, here are the areas I need to learn. I'm looking at mental commitments. That's something the county attorney has to deal with. Dependent neglect, dealing with children and difficult cases involving children. That's an important area to deal with. Just going through the general charging process, all the way through the post-conviction process. And so I'll have done enough of those by the time this year is done, that I'll say, okay, I've got my feet wet, and I know it's for this first year, I'm going to have to be working and drinking like from a fire hose. Truthfully though, it's not like I fell off the turnip truck last night. And I've been trying cases, and I've been a civil lawyer for 5 years. This case that I tried last fall is the biggest case that the Department of Justice has had in 25 years. And we are going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll be in the U.S. Supreme Court next fall. So I mean, I've done the trial work. I've done witnesses. I've done lots of evidence. I've dealt with judges and opposing counsel and motions. I've got all that stuff. Nobody has it figured out. You're just continuing to learn. But Jack raises a fair point. But one thing I will tell you that I question in terms of, and I'll ask Jack this question in a minute, is that I also, Jack is a guy who has spent most of his time defending criminals, and we've heard it tonight, criminal defendants. And we've heard it tonight when he said repeatedly that prosecutors are overcharging cases. Now there's some crazy cases out there. The Bighorn sheep that he talked about, that case should have never been charged. That was, in my opinion, the FWP should have been held liable for that one. But in general, the problem we have in this county isn't undercharging cases. It's we're not actually taking these cases that need to be charged all the way through and getting fair results. And that's what I want to focus on. It's going to be a learning curve. I know John Flynn was a very young guy when he came in and took over this job. And I believe I've got the experience and I've got the attitude and the humility to go in and say, I'm going to learn every day and you can be happy with my work.
Corey, your turn.
My turn, all right. Okay, I don't understand. So Jack, I guess a two-part question in terms of your experience. One of them I already alluded to. You've done a lot of work as a criminal defense attorney, and there's some concerns in the community of how can a guy who's been a criminal defense attorney for all these years be an effective prosecutor. And I think the second part of that question is, you have a lot of cases and appearances where you have failed to show up for a hearing, filed stuff on time, a lot of cases where, even just the research I've done over the past few years, you've been either no-show or asking to file things late and had some cases dismissed. And that's a concern. I've heard that over and over again, and if you could address that, it would probably, people would like to hear that.
I'm not sure who you're talking about, but the first part of the question is, and I'll admit, I'm not Perry Mason, okay? 99% of criminal cases settle throughout, that's the national average, 99%, okay? And of the 1% that go to trial, there's about a 98% conviction rate for prosecution. In 2011, I tried 10 cases to final verdict and I got acquittals in 8. And what I'm saying is, I'm not Perry Mason, there's a problem. There's prosecutors out there who are overcharging. If I'm able to win 80% of cases that they're supposed to win. And it's litigation. I know how to try a case. I know I can look at a case file and I can see where something has been overlooked by the prosecution. It comes with experience. It comes with trying cases. You can say we're a hired gun. I'm a hired gun. I'm going to be a hired gun for Broadwater County. I'm going to bring with me a special skill set that took me 23 years to hone. And the Bighorn Sheep case, that was brought by the Attorney General's Prosecutorial Services Division. Those are the pros. Those are the best prosecutors in the state of Montana. And I beat them 3 times. Maybe I am Perry Mason, I don't know. And then I alluded to the fact after that, Mr. Luton was indicted federally by the U.S. Attorney's Office, who are the best of the best, okay? I'm going to the 9th Circuit on May the 13th to argue that case. And I got a pretty good feeling about it. Again, it's a Class B misdemeanor, which for the 9th Circuit to grant oral argument on a case like that, they're disturbed by what happened. As to the second part of the question, being a sole practitioner, I have balls in the air, and I'm not specific. I'm not sure exactly what cases you're talking about. Sometimes appeals are dismissed at I have a case that recently where my client asked me to dismiss an appeal, but without going into specifics, I really can't answer that. But bottom line is, I'm a litigator. I'm good at what I do. And because I'm a criminal defense attorney, it does not make me soft on crime. It makes me a good litigator, and I'll be a good litigator for this county.
Now we open it up to questions from the audience, and we'd like you just to ask one question so everyone can have a chance that wants to ask one.
Somebody's got to be first.
You're first.
Mr. Morris, very successful lawyer. Why would you want to come to Broadwater County and obviously take a big decrease in pay?
You haven't seen my tax returns, have you? I grew up in a small county. I'm divorced. My wife is an attorney. She lives in Helena with my 2 young daughters. I want to be close to them, and I want to live in Broadwater County. Pay cut, this isn't a stepping stone job for me. I want to retire as your county attorney. So that answers your question. I want to give back. I've tried cases all over the state of Montana, and I've been pretty damn successful. And I want to be successful here also. For you.
Anyone else have a question for?
I have a question for both of them.
Okay.
How aggressive will you be in pursuing broken restraining orders against spouses who have in the past abused their spouse?
I can take that first. Well, anytime you get a restraining order, that's a recognition by a judge that somebody could be in danger. You have to take that very seriously. And you have to respond to, particularly if there's a broken restraining order, then that indicates 2 things. One, there was danger there, and then second, that person disregarded the order of the court to continue to put the other person in danger. And that should be a red alert to a prosecutor, to a county sheriff, that this has to be dealt with aggressively. And I think that goes without saying. I think we've all maybe aware of, a couple years ago, there was a case in Helena where where somebody went and said, we need a restraining order against this lady who's threatening to kill us, and it was a broken marriage, it was a very messy thing. The judge refused to grant the restraining order, and very recently after that, that lady then went and killed her estranged husband. And that's the kind of thing that you have to take that danger very seriously. So I will be very aggressive with it. And as far as whether that ultimately means they're guilty at the end of the case, I'll treat them fairly like I would anybody else in terms of a fair process. But I will not sit by and let those orders be broken and put people in danger.
Violation of restraining order, if we don't follow the letter of the law and honor our orders that are legally issued by a judge, that's, our society is going to go downhill. So that's paramount. These orders have to be enforced. Normally what happens, especially in domestic law, one spouse will go in and get what's called a temporary restraining order. And there has to be what's called a show cause hearing within 20 days of that order, that ex parte. Ex parte means one side going in and telling the judge, this is what happened. And the judge, if the judge finds merit, the judge will issue the order, it gets served on the respondent, and then there's a show cause hearing 20 days later. And if that hearing doesn't take place within 20 days, the order is normally dissolved. The case that Corey talked about in Helena was a tragedy, and there is a bias out there. It was a judge I know, a woman judge, and because it was a man coming in asking for a restraining order against his ex-wife, who obviously had some psychological or mental problems, I think that has something to do with the order not being granted. It was a tragedy all around, and people say, well, it was just a piece of paper. How could it have prevented the tragedy? Well, I talked to a judge, a friend of mine, and we both talked about it. When you get served with a restraining order, it's the sheriff or a deputy or a police officer who is coming to you personally and giving it to you, and you're warned if you violate that, there's going to be consequences. That didn't happen in that case, and it was tragic and it was unfortunate. The same summer that happened, I was representing a college student from Washington State University who his ex-girlfriend had gotten a restraining order from the same judge. She went to Carroll. He's in Washington State. They had a messy breakup, and that same judge signed a restraining order against him. He had to come all the way back from Washington State for the show cause hearing, and the petitioner was on the soccer team at Carroll and had to go on a road trip. She didn't show up. The restraining order was resolved, but and this happened at nearly the same time that tragic murder. So court orders have to be enforced, and if they're not, it's anarchy. But it'd be a very high priority for me.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions?
I have a question for both candidates. Our current county attorney believes that the Second Amendment relates to squirrel hunting. Could you give us what you think about the Second Amendment and if there's a potential threat here locally?
I've never been squirrel hunting. It's very clear what it stands for, and the Supreme Court has said what it stood for. And it's number one, that you have a right to keep and bear arms, and the Congress shall not infringe on that, and states shall not infringe on that. And second, it's not just a militia, it's an individual right of possession by us as American citizens. And that's crystal clear. So I don't know if there's any further debate that can be had at this point. The county attorney's job is certainly well, really any county or state government's job is to defend someone's right to keep and bear arms.
We have that right embodied in both the federal and state constitution. The United States Supreme Court recently has struck down, Washington D.C. had, basically all firearms were banned from the district, and that has been struck down. My job as county attorney would be to make sure that the laws as written by our legislature regarding firearms are adhered to. But firearms are not inherently evil or bad. This is the state of Montana. We all grew up with them. And I don't squirrel hunt either. And I don't know specifically, Tim, what you're referring to about what the county attorney may or may not have said. But again, it's the law of the land, the law of the state, and as far as I'm concerned, it's inviolate. I mean, we have that right in the Bill of Rights.
Anyone else have a question?
Our present government now, it seems that our Attorney General at the federal level seems to pick and choose what laws that he wants to enforce. As an attorney and as a lawyer for the county, are we going to follow that same rule, or are we just going to actually enforce the laws that are on the books?
You want to go first, or me to go?
Go ahead.
Okay. So U.S. Attorney General Holder recently said, and he was specifically talking about laws against same-sex marriage. And he said, attorneys general of the state, you don't have to enforce that. It's clearly unconstitutional, so just don't enforce it and go ahead and tell the courts that it's unconstitutional and they just need to strike it down. And it's amazing that we are in a time now where that's viewed as just almost flippantly and cavalierly as that's clearly unconstitutional. Any point prior to this in human history, no one has looked at that and said, that's an absolutely unacceptable law. In fact, we've been built on a civilization that believed in that and adhered to it. But the other point you have here is just, can the attorney decide to pick and choose what laws they enforce? The answer to that is no. You absolutely can't do that. If you do that, what you've done is you've changed the Constitution. You've said you've got a House of Representatives at the state or federal level. You've got a Senate. They pass the law. They send it to the governor or the president. That chief executive signs it, and then you have to enforce it. But wait, we forgot. There's one more step. You go to the Attorney General who has to defend it in court, and you have to convince him or her, depending on who's in the office, depending on what day of the week it is, depending on what pet issue it is, and convince them that they have to defend the law. It's nonsense. It's not just nonsense. It's gonna undermine the foundation of our constitutional government. So if the law is on the books, if it's been passed legally, then it's the attorney's job to enforce it. If a court ultimately strikes it down, or the legislature ultimately changes it, that's that may be what they do under that system. But the attorney's job is not to pick and choose. The attorney's job is to represent the people and to enforce the laws faithfully to the best of their ability.
Just so I understand your question, you're talking about Attorney General Holder, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, this is a prime example. When Montana, prior to the last change in the medical marijuana law, do you remember how the feds came in and prosecuted all of these, well, people who were thought they were adhering to state law? There was something called the Holder letter out there that he basically wrote that said, as long as these medical marijuana providers are following state law, we're not going to prosecute. Well, that was a lie. He came in here and we all know what he did. And now we've got the state of Washington and the state of Colorado where they've legalized marijuana completely, and the federal government doesn't know what the hell to do about it. And the states, and again, as a county attorney, I hope I never have to deal with Mr. Holder or any U.S. attorney, but unfortunately that's the way it is, you know? With each administration. I'm sorry?
It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be, but unfortunately that's the way this administration and this Attorney General seems to be handling things. It's very dysfunctional. Could you imagine if the state of California legalized marijuana? It's a state of 38 million people. I think it's the eighth largest it's the eighth largest economy in the world. There was a initiative a couple years ago, and the medical marijuana producers spent millions of dollars campaigning against it, and the law failed. But boy, if California would have gone, I don't know what the federal government would have done. I mean, they would have been, what are you going to do? You're going to only prosecute crimes in little states like Montana and let California, well now Colorado and Washington get away. It's dysfunctional, it doesn't make sense. Nobody can explain it to me where there's any rationalization behind it other than politics. So I don't agree with everything that happens that comes out of Washington. But it changes slowly, and with each election cycle, I think we the people who we vote into office slowly changes things for the better.
Anyone else have a question? Okay.
My name is Kyle Hopstead. Corey, you alluded to some knotheads you dealt with. I think, Jack, you talked about a fist fight that you witnessed. We have contention in the county, and I'm glad you talked a little bit about it, but what can you do to minimize that and get us down to the facts and help our governing bodies work in a more unified way?
Well, again, it comes down to, I think, experience and judgment. I met John Flynn in 1991 as a clerk, and I practiced with him and against him, both criminally and civilly. And that was one thing about John. You know, I might lose a case, but I'm not going to hold it against John. Okay, I always left John with a feeling of goodwill, and we did our best. And you got to be able to put that behind you and be a professional. I can't tell politicians to get along. You know, all I can do is try to facilitate rationale and reason and give my advice as to what the legal issue is. But again, politics, it ain't beanbag, as somebody said once. And yeah, in Whitehall we had a fist fight break out in a town council meeting over water meters. And not only was I a witness, but I ended up prosecuting that case. And the defense lawyer from Bozeman tried to get the judge to throw me off the case because he said I was a witness. But again, it all comes down to civility. It comes down to sitting down and talking about our differences. But again, you can't force someone to change their view or their emotion. But you know, it's democracy, and it's not always pretty. But it's the best system we have. And I would personally, I would try to meet every department head. I would try every week. I would make my rounds, and I would try to develop a cordial relationship and start there. But again, I think you know, politics at the local level, it's the most real, and it can get quite emotional. But I don't think it's something that is unsolvable. It just, we have to grow up and do what's best for our community.
I think there's a couple of things that can be done. I'll first start with procedural things, and then I'll talk more about the harder part. Procedurally, I think that there's a lot of mistrust in the community, some of which I think honestly is genuine, and some of it I think is people just like to stir up dust. And a lot of that can be reduced with things that will just help the foreseeability of what's going to happen. In other words, the county commission is going to take an action on Tuesday. If there's a way, this is what I would ask as a county attorney. Can I see it on Thursday so I can do research on Friday, and I can come back to you before the meeting and say, here's one weird law in the code that I found that I didn't know about, and so make sure that you deal with this issue. And here's a procedural thing that might make sense because I saw this work in another county or another, whatever. And I think there may be some ways that I would ask as a county attorney to give me time to actually do the legal research and be able to provide them as a county commission guidance on there's a right way to do this and there's a wrong way to do this. And I recommend you take these steps. I'm not telling you what decision to make or what policy to enact. I'm telling you that here are some legal requirements that if you meet, then everybody's job will be easier. And I think the other part of that goes with, go ahead and let the citizens see this thing in advance and give them the time to vet it, give them the time to do their own research. They can come in and talk to me, and I can't give them legal advice, but I can say, here's the legal advice I gave to the county commission, and it's, you know, it's in writing, and take it home and study it. So just procedurally, I think there's some things we can do to eliminate some of this concern, some of which is genuine, and some of which I think is some people just need to say, you know, I'm just going to have to agree to disagree. But I think there'd be a way to deal with some of that. The harder part is the human part. The harder part is people who either hate each other, don't want to get along, whatever it may be. And you know, Jack's right that there's some amount of that you can't change. but there is a lot of that you can change. I really believe you can change. I've worked with teams, I've led teams, where I had people in the team that literally, on probably a weekly basis, I'm bringing them in my office and I'm sitting them down and I'm saying, you don't realize how negative your attitude is. People walk in the door and you give them the look that says that you wish they were dead. And talk to them on a close personal basis, where at the end of the conversation, the grown men literally cry and apologize, and we pray together, and we come out of that with a commitment to work better. And then guess what? The next week we're back in there having the same conversation. But sometimes that's what it takes as a personal level to say, we have got to work together as a team. And I really believe, I've been saying this in the newspaper, I've been saying this to people around, this is a team. This county government is a team. And we have to start thinking like a team, and acting like a team, and communicating like a team. And guess what? We're going to start performing like a team. We're going to start winning. And winning, right now we're not winning. Right now we're losing. If you make up the scorecard, hate letters every week in the newspaper, that's not a sign of winning, that's a sign of losing. But we can win. And I'll talk about this more when I close tonight. But I believe there's a way to win, and I believe there's a way to start growing closer together. And it starts first, I think, with some procedural things so people just trust you. But I think a lot of it's going to be personal relationships. Going to each county commissioner individually and saying, hey, let's work together. Please just help me out. Going to the sheriff. Go and saying, if I screw up a case, or you're mad at me, or your deputies think that I completely blew it on the stand, come tell me, and I'll do better. And that human dynamic is the hardest part, but it's the most important part. It's the ingredient that's going to move us towards winning.
Okay. I think we'll close now, and then if you have questions for them individually later. Would you question? Or did you have one, sir? You would like word?
You kind of touched on it a little bit with reading the newspaper, and I've been to a couple of meetings before. And one of the things that seems to prevail is meetings behind, when the meetings aren't in session. Is there anything we can do about that?
I'll answer, and then if you want to answer after me. Here's what you have to understand about the Montana Constitution. The Montana Constitution says every board, commission, etc. will have open meetings, okay? And people often don't know really what that means. And you know certainly from your time in the legislature. If there's a committee and there's enough people on that committee together to make a quorum, and they're there unless they're at the after-hour social, that's considered a meeting. If they start talking about business and they can carry something out, that's considered a meeting. So you've got to be able to notice that and tell people that that's on the agenda. So if you've got 3 commissioners, then 2 of them together working on business would be considered a meeting, and it needs to be open. I don't believe that means that if they meet in aisle 5 of the grocery store, it's a meeting and they have to run the other way. I really don't believe that. But what I do believe is that there needs to be a commitment to saying, we're going to schedule meetings and then we're going to notice meetings. Because I've won cases where I challenged a commission who did something that they didn't notice. And the Constitution is very clear, and the state statute is that you have got to provide notice in advance so the public's informed as to what's going on. This is not hard. All it takes is discipline to keep doing it on a regular basis, and then bringing that quorum together to talk about business. So what I would do is lay out, here's what a quorum is, which would be 2 commissioners that are there to even discuss business or to vote on anything or to come up with a plan. Again, if they happen to go to the same church, I don't think that's a meeting, and we need to not just get our hair on fire over that. But laying out that kind of clarity, I think, will help people understand what they can expect from their county commission, and then their county commission, it's kind of a pain in the butt, but the county commission has to be able to do their schedule accordingly so that they are there when the public expects them to be there, and the public can hear what they're saying.
I think Ben Franklin said it, something to the effect that sunshine is the best disinfectant. That means open government. That nothing should be done behind closed doors, but there are 2 exceptions to that. And I've been involved. One is dealing with employee issues. Employees have a right to privacy when it comes to a public forum, but they can waive that right. I was the city attorney in Whitehall, and there was a public employee issue, and the employee came to the commission meeting with his attorney, and they asked to have the meeting closed, and the mayor refused to close it, obstinately refused to close it, and he stalemated us. And so the meeting broke up because I advised the commission, without waiver from that employee, we're facing a lawsuit. And the mayor is trying to fire this fella, but he wasn't gonna give him the benefit of a closed meeting. The other time it's appropriate and necessary is when there's litigation involving a city or a county government, when the leaders are meeting with their legal representative, and it's just like in any other civil lawsuit, there's attorney-client privilege, there's work product discovery that you don't want the other side to know what your strategy is. So those are times when meetings do have to be closed, and I agree with Corey. When commissioners or elected officials run into each other on the street, I don't believe that constitutes a quorum or a meeting. And again, it's a fine balancing act, but I don't think it is that hard. And it's, well, we've been doing it for 220-some years now as a country. But again, I'm for openness. I'm for nothing done behind closed doors. It's the government of the people, by the people, for the people. But the citizens we have to take part, and we have to hold our elected officials accountable. And I think that's real important. It's easy to point the finger and say this happened or that happened, but we as citizens have to come together, come to these meetings. I told you about 2.5 years of me drafting public notices and no one's showing up to these meetings, you know, and then all of a sudden when it's time to start the project, well, how did this happen? Well, there's 55 public notices that I noticed up and published. So, you know, it's not just the government, the people have to be engaged and involved and demand openness. And I think we do to a large degree. And again, we're held hostage by the Supreme Court, where they are at that particular term, what a decision is. But I'm for open government and nothing done behind closed doors, other than if it's an employee right issue or if it has to do with litigation involving the county. So that's where I stand on that.
Okay, we'll have a closing then for 3 minutes, and you open, right?
I open first, yeah.
Okay, we'll let you close first, Jack, and then Corey.
First, I'd like thank you for, I guess, the Broadwater Reporter and the Rod and Gun Club and the Cattlewoman Association in Corey. I really enjoyed this forum. What I bring to this position, if I am elected, I bring experience. I've represented small business men, I've represented large businesses. My aunt and uncle used to run a bulk fuel distributorship down in the Jefferson Valley called Connor Exxon. And they had the contract not only, I mean, they delivered to all the ranches, but they also had the contract with the Golden Sunlight Mine, which was a pretty valuable contract. And I tell you what, I was continually fighting with Town Pump and a family called the Canellis who kept trying to undercut them. But the Town Pump stayed, I mean, the Golden Sunlight stayed with the local business, and I helped make that happen. I've represented ranchers, I've represented individuals, I've done probate law. That's one of the things that you don't talk about, but if someone dies in a county, it's the county attorney or the county administrator's job to probate that person's estate. And it happens a lot in the smaller counties. I've done a lot of probate work. I've done a lot of litigation. I've advised city councils. I've had oral argument before the Supreme Court on behalf of the town of Whitehall, and I was successful. Again, I believe that the best government is the government works when it's closest to the people, like we have right here. I don't think we need to rely on Helena or the Attorney General's office telling us how to run government here in Broadwater County. I think you've been doing a pretty good job of it, and it ebbs and flows like everything else in life. And but I don't plan on using this position as a stepping stone. I would like to retire in this office, and I bring 23 years of practical small town attorney experience. I've represented, like I said, small business, large business, people without money, people with money. I put a lien on the Yellowstone Club. That's one of my One of the things I'm most proud of. Especially when a law firm from Portland told me they were gonna cut me in half with a chainsaw if I didn't release the lien. Well, the lien got released after my client who did the work. He had employees to pay, he had loans to pay, he had equipment to pay for $800,000. This is a small contractor out of Whitehall. He got paid finally, and I'm proud of that. But I handed out my resume, and I've worked all kinds of jobs growing up, and I've tried all kinds of cases, and I'm looking forward on Sunday. I'm flying out to Seattle. I'm going to be arguing before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on behalf of a Montana businessman who got caught up in the politics of personal destruction. And I'm proud of representing him, and I'd be proud to represent this county. Thank you.
Well, I think Jack is doing a great job. I think he should keep doing what he's doing. I'm in the National Guard, and I supervise a number of soldiers. My particular position, I'm a major, and I have a sergeant major who's a D9 senior NCO, and I have 4 captains and 2 lieutenants and about 12 other soldiers who work for me in my particular section. And I've had some absolutely outstanding young soldiers and officers work for me. And last year I had my best captain, who was just, he's a stud. He's really aggressive. He's got combat experience in Iraq. He's a great leader. And we were sending him out to command a company, which is, you don't keep your best people. You send them out to command and lead the soldiers in front. And my last day with him, I'm talking to him as he's leaving to go command his company. And I was talking to him, and the thing that's great about this guy is he's really smart, and he demands the highest standards. But he also, because of that, is critical of people who are not at that level. And it's a problem that I've talked to him a few times about. And so as he's getting ready to leave that day, I said, you've got a choice. You are going to be a force for change, but it's up to you. Are you going to be a positive force for change or a negative force for change? And that's the decision that's before us today, and that's the decision that's before all of you as voters and the other people that are running for office. We will be a force for change, but will we be positive or will we be negative? And I'm committing to you I'll be a positive force for change. I talked about teamwork earlier, and I talked about winning. And I want to tell you what winning looks like in my mind. Winning looks like a county attorney talking to a sheriff and talking to a detective about a really hard case, and coming in on a Sunday and working on it, and working again on a Monday night, and working again on a Tuesday night, and getting all the details right, and calling that victim on a Thursday morning and saying, we're going to take care of you, and then filing that thing on a Thursday. Because we spent the time to get it right. Not because we filed it, it was screwed up, we had to pull it back and do it again, and nothing ever happened, or we never did anything with the case, and we never called the victim. That's winning. Talking to the county commission and giving them advice on the law up front so they make a decision that everyone recognizes as legal and no one is claiming a suspect. The deal's in, it's all crooked. That's winning. Coming together as a community and listening to people that come in your door and have a simple question rather than slamming the door and saying, I don't work for you, I work for the county, I can't give you legal advice. That's winning, and that's what I want to do. I want to win, and I want, not just me, I want our team to win, and I want our team to commit to come together and to work together for you, because you demand our best. You should, because we work for you. You don't work for us. And you are not getting the best right now. And I'm only one small part of it, but I hope to do really well with my part, and I will give you my best.
I want to thank both of you candidates, and of course the Broadway Reporter and Rodman Gun Club, but most of all I want to thank the people who were interested enough to come and listen to these candidates before you mark your ballot. Thank you.
Just a reminder, everyone, next Thursday, same place, we have a county commissioner forum, so mark your calendar, we'll start at 6 o'clock, and I hope to see you. Thank you for coming, and have a
seniors out there.
Well, I guess we have to get a sign up now. Maybe I will from the other
Already in the dog.
How many was here when